The night was dark and quiet. The only light came from the street lamps, casting distorted shadows against the walls of Helena's house. Inside, the family slept peacefully. The clock in the living room read 2:47 a.m. when a strange noise cut through the silence. A soft click on the back door handle. Small, almost imperceptible. Thor, the family's Belgian Malinois, was curled up in his blanket beside the kitchen door. He opened his eyes, perked up his ears, and sniffed the air. Something was different. Something was wrong. That was when he heard it. A muffled sound of footsteps in the backyard. The scent of sweat and a faint metallic touch in the air. Iron, perhaps a tool? The dog's heart began to race. He didn't know exactly what was happening, but his instincts screamed, danger. Upstairs, Helena and her daughter, Sophia, slept peacefully. Her husband, Marcos, was away on a business trip. They were alone. Or almost. Thor stood up, his muscles tensed, his eyes fixed on the back door. Another sound. A metallic creak. Someone was trying to force the lock. Then, the door slowly opened, and Thor prepared to act. The back door creaked slightly as it opened, revealing a dark silhouette moving cautiously. The intruder stepped in with light footsteps, holding a crowbar in one hand and a flashlight in the other. He had done this before, entering silently, taking what he wanted, and leaving without a trace. But this time, something was different. The air inside the house felt heavy, as if something was watching him in the darkness. Before he could advance, a low and menacing growl filled the room. It wasn't an alert bark or the desperate sound of an ordinary dog. It was a warning. A challenge. Thor was there, his paws firmly planted on the cold kitchen floor, his body tense like a coiled spring ready to strike. His eyes glowed in the dim light, locked onto the stranger who had invaded his territory. He would not back down. The thief hesitated for a second, but quickly tried to handle the problem. With his free hand, he pulled a piece of meat from his pocket, a cheap trick to distract dogs. He tossed it onto the floor, hoping Thor would take the bait and give him time to proceed. But Thor didn't even blink. He was no ordinary dog. He was trained to protect, to recognize a real threat, and in that moment, he knew that man did not belong in this house. Realizing his strategy had failed, the thief gripped the crowbar tighter, now aware that he had to get rid of the animal before continuing. But before he could move, Thor vanished into the darkness of the hallway. The man smirked. Coward, he thought. He took a deep breath and started walking, convinced that the danger had passed. Little did he know, this was just the first phase of the game. Every step he took echoed through the silent house. The intruder felt cold sweat running down his neck. He tried to ignore the feeling, but the truth was, he had no idea where the dog was now. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the darkness. The silence was absolute. Terrifying. Then, Thor was waiting for the right moment, playing a mind game with the thief, making him more anxious with every passing second. The thief felt his heart pounding in his chest when he realized he no longer knew where the dog was. The kitchen now seemed much larger, much darker. He tightened his grip on the crowbar, sweeping the flashlight around the room, trying to find any sign of the animal. But all he could see were shadows. The silence grew more unbearable by the second. He tried to convince himself that the dog had fled, but then, a low, rhythmic sound filled the air. Breathing. Slow, controlled, coming from the darkness. The intruder spun on his heels, scanning the gloom, but saw nothing. He didn't know where the sound was coming from, only that he was not alone. Sweat began to trickle down his temples, and for the first time that night, he felt real fear. And then, it happened. A dark blur shot out of the shadows like lightning. The thief had no time to react before he felt a crushing pressure on his right arm. Before he could react, out of nowhere, Thor emerged like a shadowy blur. Thor had leaped with surgical precision, biting down on the wrist that held the crowbar. The force of the bite was instant and overwhelming, making the intruder drop the metal tool, which clattered to the floor with a loud crash. The man's scream of pain echoed through the house as he desperately tried to break free. But Thor did not relent. His sharp teeth sank into the thief's flesh, and his muscular body held the man down as if saying, "You're not going anywhere." The intruder desperately tried to break free, kicking the air and attempting to strike Thor with his free arm, but the dog was faster, more calculated. Before the man could hit him, Thor released his wrist for just a second, only to, in an agile movement, lunge at his leg and bring him down to the floor. The impact was brutal. The intruder fell onto his back, the air escaping his lungs in a strangled groan. He tried to get up, but Thor was now on top of him, baring his teeth, growling low. The message was clear: if he tried again, there would be no second chance. Pure fear was written across the thief's face as he remained still, completely overpowered. He realized, too late, that he should never have entered that house. The intruder's muffled scream echoed through the hallways, waking Helena from a deep sleep. Still groggy, she sat up in bed, trying to understand whether it was real or just part of a nightmare. Then she heard another sound, a fierce growl, unlike any she had ever heard from Thor before. Her heart pounded. Something was happening. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone and opened the security camera app. What she saw made her blood run cold. The screen showed a man lying on the kitchen floor, with Thor on top of him, ready to strike again if necessary. The intruder looked utterly terrified, barely moving, his eyes wide with pure panic. The realization hit Helena instantly. There was a thief inside her house. Desperation took over her body, but something inside her whispered, "You are not alone." She looked back at the screen and saw Thor, still vigilant. He was protecting his family. Without hesitation, Helena dialed the police. The dispatcher's voice on the other end seemed distant, as if everything was happening in slow motion. "There's an intruder in my house. My dog has him pinned down," she said, trying to stay calm. The operator assured her that a patrol car was already on the way. But now, the next few minutes would be crucial. Helena got up and, gathering all the courage she had, slowly walked down the stairs. With each step, her breathing grew heavier. When she reached the entrance to the kitchen, she saw Thor in his attack stance, teeth bared, ears pointed forward. The thief was trembling, unable to make any sudden movements. Helena felt a lump in her throat. "Thor," she whispered. The dog heard her but didn't take his eyes off his prey. He knew the threat was still there. The police siren finally broke the silence of the night. Red and blue lights reflected against the walls of the house as the patrol car stopped outside. Two officers quickly got out, weapons drawn, ready to act. Helena ran to the door and opened it, pointing toward the kitchen. Within seconds, the officers were on top of the intruder, handcuffing him before he had a chance to resist. The nightmare was over, and it was all thanks to Thor. The thief was taken away by the police, still dazed and unable to comprehend how everything had gone so wrong. As he was placed into the patrol car, one of the officers looked at Helena and then at Thor, who remained alert, as if ensuring the threat was truly gone. "This dog is a real hero," the officer said, a mix of admiration and awe in his voice. "If it weren't for him, this could have ended very differently." A chill ran down Helena's spine as she heard those words. Reality hit hard. Thor had saved their lives. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. The next morning, neighbors began knocking on Helena's door, asking if she and Sophia were okay. Many wanted to see Thor, the hero dog who had prevented a crime and bravely protected his family. His name became a hot topic in social media groups, local newspapers, and even television programs. People from different places started sharing the story, amazed by the courage of the Belgian Malinois. But for Thor, none of that mattered. He didn't understand headlines, interviews, or viral videos. All he knew was that his family was safe, and that was what truly mattered. That night, when Helena finally sat on the couch and called Thor over, he jumped up beside her and rested his head on her lap. Helena smiled, running her fingers through his soft fur, feeling the comforting warmth of her protector. She looked into Thor's eyes and whispered, "You are my guardian angel, my hero." He responded in the only way he knew, wagging his tail and closing his eyes, at peace. He knew he had fulfilled his mission. But if needed, he would do it all over again. Thor's story is a powerful reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they have 4 paws, watchful eyes, and a heart that beats fiercely for the love of their family. If it weren't for him, what could have happened that night? no one knows for sure. But one thing is clear: that thief would never again underestimate the power of a loyal dog.